Hello and welcome to Piano Shack with me, Woody. Yes, we are on the road again. You guys wanted more hardware. I hear you. Why don't we drive up to Stockholm City and pick up yet another classic synthesizer? So it is a beautiful summer's evening. I'm so happy that you could join me. What can we say about this particular synthesizer then? Well, it definitely falls into the category of synthesizers that were once great, but were superseded by newer models, and these original old models became unloved, forgotten, and therefore somewhere cheap. And that's the beauty of this. Yes, you can pick up a great synthesizer that's equally as good today as it was then for not very much money. That's what we're going to do today. So what else can we say about this particular synthesizer? Well, it's from 2003. I did a little bit of research before we left, and it was very widely used by the R&B crowd, especially the touring musicians of the Sorry about that. Where were we? Yes, this particular synthesizer is used by, or was used by, many of the great R&B touring acts of the 2000s, including a fellow called Joe Sample from the Crusaders, who I saw performing in Stockholm. He was well known for playing the Fender Rhodes, but on this occasion he was playing this synthesizer instead, which I felt was a bit of a letdown actually. Although it did sound okay. But anyway, it's about a half-hour drive into the city. We're actually going back to Södermalm, where I picked up the JV1080, funnily enough. That's a bit of a coincidence. What I'll do when I come home is to record the demo songs from this synthesizer, and we'll play them now as a bit of background music during the journey. And I never know where you're allowed to park and where you're not allowed to park, so let's just hope for the best. Okay, off we go. Looks good, thanks.
Sure.
Great. Okay guys, the deal is done, and what an awesome guy he was. That's one of the best things about these mystery synth pickups. You never quite know who you're going to meet, and this was an awesome guy with a cool story. So it turns out that guy, I won't name him, is a well-established music producer, songwriter, DJ. Done a lot of work for some famous Swedish artists such as Darin, another one who's so famous, I've forgotten what they're called now, but he's also been over to the States and worked with Quincy, Timbaland. It's really awesome. So I'm now the proud owner of a new synthesizer. Let's head on home. And then later on in the week, I'll reveal to you what it is and play you some sounds, and we'll talk a little bit about it. That'll be fun. Okay, let's head off for home. Once again, I'll try and find some demo songs of this very same synthesizer that you can enjoy as we drive home. Nice old Mustang there, guys. go. As you have probably figured out then, what we have here is the MOTIF rack, nowadays called the MOTIF Classic. This is the very first version of the MOTIF series. Now after this there was the MOTIF ES rack, or the MOTIF rack ES, then the XS came a little bit later. But since we're collecting iconic and groundbreaking synthesizers, I thought it was quite fitting to pick up the very first original version of the MOTIF. I'd like us all to be up to speed on what the MOTIF is, and the MOTIF rack in particular, so what better place to go than the fabulous Sound on Sound magazine, one of my favourite magazines of all time, together with Mountain Bike UK back in the day. This review is from 2003, I'm just going to skip down. So yeah, about 10 years after my 1080 was released, and 10 years before the Integra. Let's just read the summary. Pros, a great sounding synth with plenty of off-the-wall possibilities. Effects sound excellent. Expandability with PLG plug-in synth boards. More on this later. This is a huge benefit of this particular MOTIF rack version. Extended polyphony and improved range of effects over MOTIF keyboards. Oh, okay, some improved features over the keyboard. Arpeggio outputs over MIDI. The cons then, the button intensive editing. Yes, of course, the front panel is very minimal here. Slightly inflexible effects deployment. Some worrying timing problems in multi-timbral use at the time of review. We'll get back to that in a second as well. That's very interesting. The essential sounds of the keyboard motifs in a 1U rack with enhancements. The absence of the sampler and sequencer facilities are made up for with a doubling of polyphony, more effects and outputs, extra preset and user banks, arpeggiator output over MIDI, and an excellent, if PC only, software sequencer. However, at the time of writing, the MOTIF rack is compromised when operating multi-timbrally, and this must be addressed before it can be considered a practical alternative to the MOTIF keyboard. Yeah, I'm going to mention that to you a little bit later on. If we scroll on down, I'm going to get to the specs here. The MOTIF rack then, sampling no sequencer, 128 polyphony, that's good. Plug-in slots 2. Smart media no, USB yes, just the MIDI though. SCSI, wow, who would want SCSI these days? SPDIF, that's okay. SPDIF. SPDIF. The LCD much smaller than on the MOTIF keyboard, of course. Do we have any number of presets here, perhaps? Preset voices. Down here, 128 times 5 banks. Here then is the killer feature, and one of the reasons why I bought this particular version of the MOTIF. It accepts PLG plug-in boards, and these are not expansion sounds or more wave ROM like you get with the Roland modules. This was an entirely new synthesizer on a card. You can plug 2 of these into the MOTIF rack. And what I want to bring your attention to is 2 of these cards, which are the PLG 150DX. This is a DX7 on a board. And also we have the PLG 150AN, which is a very nice sounding analog modeling synthesizer. Now, I used to have a CS6X, and I bought both of these cards. This would have been about 10-15 years ago. And at that time, you could pick up these cards very, very cheaply for probably about $50 each. But now the prices have skyrocketed on, especially the DX and the AN cards, and they're very hard to find. And the prices are $200, or in fact north of that in some cases. But my aim is to find both of these, if we can, and put them into the MOTIF rack. It would be a fabulous way to get the sounds of the DX7 back in the piano shack. Okay, let's go back to Woody, and I do apologise for his microphone sound quality. This is what my camera sounds like if you use the mic input and switch off the limiting setting. Now, as you may have noticed on the demonstration there on the B-roll footage, this unit has a minor problem, a slight issue. It's about this data encoder dial. Now, I thought it was just going backwards. You turn it clockwise to decrement the values, which is the opposite way around of all the other synthesizers I've ever owned. But I talked to the previous owner. He told me he'd had it from new, and that's just the way it was designed to work, and he's never done any modifications on it. I'm not totally convinced, and I found another issue today when I was doing this demonstration earlier on. It's supposed to, I would assume, click up one preset for every click of the data wheel here, but it's not. Sometimes you have to do 4 or 5 clicks before it increments up, so a little bit of a pain. I have checked the schematics and I might have a crack at fixing this myself, but otherwise I guess you can just live with it. You can use the up and down buttons here instead of using the data wheel, and I guess, you know me, I'll probably end up using this one mainly as a preset machine anyway. What then are my plans for this little synthesizer? Well, I really enjoyed playing the presets this morning, so I think we need to dig more into that and do a more thorough exploration of the presets on the MOTIF. We'll also compose some music with it, because that's what it's all about. And many of you might also be wondering, what's the point in me picking up a MOTIF rack when, as you may know, I have another synthesizer that has similar, albeit much more advanced capabilities? Let me quickly go and get that for you. So this then is another keyboard I have from YAMAHA, which I've been enjoying a lot recently, as a matter of fact. I composed some music with it just yesterday evening. Let's open this up. The dishwasher is barfing out there in the kitchen. There you go. So what we have here is the XF6, also from Yamaha. This is the latest incarnation of the MOTIF series, actually. The MOTIF XF was the high-end flagship version of the MOTIF series, the final one as a matter of fact. But this is the budget, slightly stripped down, more plasticky version of the MOTIF XF. This is the Mo XF. Costs about half the price, but it's got exactly the same sounds and most of the features of the flagship instrument. Is there any point then in having both a MOX-F and the original MOTIF rack? Not really, because this one exceeds it and outperforms it in every single way, as you would expect. But this is a YouTube channel where we demonstrate interesting synthesizers, and this is a bit of a classic, and I did want to get in the original MOTIF on the channel so we can do some demonstrations, feature it and pay tribute to it. Another thing that interests me is that Sound on Sound magazine, Sound on Sound magazine, really slammed this thing. They hammered it for having really bad MIDI timing when you're using it multi-timbrally. Now, I find that a little bit hard to believe, but nevertheless, it's got a really bad reputation now for being terrible at MIDI. You should probably avoid this unit and go for the ES or one of the even later rack models. But I'm not sure. I want to try this out for myself. So let's do some tests and see if there really is a timing issue with the original MOTIF rack and how bad it is. Thank you very much, by the way, for all of the suggestions for a name for the series where we'll be exploring cheap and rather unloved rack synthesizers from the 90s and the noughties. Tons of suggestions. Check my previous video. That was the Integra versus JV 1080, and you can see all the various suggestions there. A popular one was woodypianoshack, so we might go with that. We'll see. Thank you again for the suggestions. And that was pretty much all I had to talk to you about today. Thank you ever so much for joining me as we picked up the MOTIF. I hope you enjoyed it. Is it MOTIF or MOTIF, by the way? You guys will probably let me know in the comments. Stay tuned for more cheap rack synths then on the Woody Rack Shack and lots of other fun synthesizers as well. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching, liking, and as always, subscribing. I'll see you soon. Cheerio.